When you and I first talked, we talked about, the challenges with DEI right now. At least in the United States. Is most of your business in Canada? And are you having the same challenges as we're having here with, certain states basically not wanting DEI because they don't actually understand, they don't really understand it or why it's necessary, or that I think, as I have said many, many times, I believe in it. I don't believe in it to check a box, right? I want to see more women leaders. I don't want to see them promoted just because they're a woman.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's what I think most of the politicians are trying to get people ginned up about.
Exactly. And we work with clients all over the world, actually. And it's interesting because each country has different history, has different ideologies. So you see that the concept of DEI change very drastically depending on the country that you're working in. What are some of those priorities? And I find the biggest challenge I see with organizations and not buying into it is a mix between sensationalization in the media and what, we talk about sometimes in the media and what's shared, where it's really, it's sad to see, I think, because DEI, we'll talk about, maybe one demographic, or a lot of the conversations around DEI, at least in the media, are just around sexual orientation or just race and ethnicity, where there's so much more involved. And, a lot of our conversations are about different points of intersectionality, what makes someone unique. So this could be everything from, are you a caregiver? Are you a junior employee or a senior employee? Are you in a head office or a satellite office? Those are all essentially areas of DEI that, that organizations need to essentially think through. And another reason why I see a lot of organizations, again, not be bought into it, it's tying back to what I was saying earlier about not aligning to strategic priorities. So when we work with a lot of our organizations, a lot of the times they'll engage us and, we're like, okay, why do you want to do this? And they're like, we don't know. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, right. That's not a good enough reason. Yeah. I'd love to take your money, but
yeah, exactly. It's like, this isn't going to work.
Well, not everybody really has the stones to say that, right?
Exactly.
Because most people just, I just want the money. I don't care.
And that's what I also see really sad in this DEI space, because, people don't go into like accounting and pretend to be an accountant. You need to have specific, qualifications, certifications, etc. Whereas DEI is such an interesting space because unfortunately, a lot of DEI today is based on lived experience.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people that enter into the profession that personally, I don't believe, they're pulling on their own experience, which is very valid, but it's not, the broader space. So then we get these like, you're like, who made that strategy, or who thought that was a good idea of something to implement? So it's a weird space that we're in. I hope that we start to see a little bit more control around the DEI landscape, similar that we see with HR and getting certified and things like that. I think would help kind of control a lot of the challenges that we're seeing today.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And what you're describing is very similar to the fact that, all of a sudden everyone's a coach.
Yes.
And
because
I hired some people, so I could be I can be a hiring coach. No. Or I can be a career coach because I hired some people. No. And they don't have any training. They don't actually understand what coaching is. Really what they are is a consultant.
Exactly.
Right. So, and they don't know the distinction between that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who don't know enough to ask the right questions, right?
Yeah. And it's upsetting because then I think businesses do get taken advantage of, and then they bring in these individuals that maybe aren't, experts.
That are great salespeople.
Yeah, exactly. And then it creates this like, kind of perspective of what this field is, which then hurts, I think, the profession.
I agree. And I think that is it's common among a number of different professions. So that's really great. What would you say is the competitive nature of your business? I mean, you're talking about all these other people popping up, but what does that really look like in practice? And how do you distinguish yourself?
Oh, good question. So, yeah, I find I find, especially in the DEI space, a lot of the individuals that will come up in the space or other businesses tend to be more focused on, I'd say, emotion driven and feelings driven. How do employees feel in the workplace, which is still valid. You want to make sure that employees are, have positive sentiment towards the organization. And this is kind of what really drove my business, though, was around how do you leverage data to tell that story. So, what we would often see, prior to starting my organization is you'd go into organizations and they'd say, we have a problem with this demographic because maybe there's one loud voice within that demographic that's, sharing their thoughts. Now, often what happens, it maybe gets raised to the leadership level, depending on who the voice is, or it maybe gets forgotten. And our view was always, how do we let data tell that story? So if we're discussing things like sentiment, what does that look like across the organization? If we're discussing, a DEI issue around promotions, is there actually a trending difference that we're seeing over time across different demographics? Are more people that are of a certain demographic going on performance evaluation or PIPs than people that are not of that demographic? So really kind of fact-based, again, discussions that drive the strategy. And then again, aligning those facts to the strategic priorities. So if we want to serve our customers better, are there specific pockets that aren't serving customers better? And is it because they're unhappy? How do we now increase their engagement so that they're better employees? So that's kind of how we differentiate, I'd say, as opposed to just coming in and being like mentorship program or, social posts on whatever, specific. Yeah.
Carol Schultz here. Thanks for watching this excerpt from Authentically Successful. The conversation doesn't end there. So if you want to hear this episode in full and all my conversations with many other successful founders and CEOs, please visit verticalelevation.com/podcast.